Hey everyone, welcome back to Chasing English. If this is your first time here, I just want to say something from the heart before we begin. I'm not a native speaker. I'm not standing here as some perfect English teacher who has everything figured out. I'm simply a learner, just like many of you, trying to grow a little more every day through reading, listening, speaking, making mistakes, starting again, and learning from real life along the way. This space has never been about perfection. It has always been about honesty, about courage, about showing up even when your voice shakes a little, about practicing even when you feel slow, about choosing growth even when growth feels uncomfortable. So if you are someone who wants to improve your English in a way that feels human, gentle, realistic, and encouraging, then I'm really glad you're here. Truly, you are in the right place. Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's spend this time together. Today, I want to talk about something that goes far beyond grammar, pronunciation, or vocabulary lists. I want to talk about mindset. Not the loud, flashy kind of mindset talk that sounds good for 5 minutes and then disappears. I mean the real kind. The quiet kind. The kind that shapes your choices when nobody is watching. The kind that decides whether you keep going or give up too early. The kind that influences how you speak to yourself after a mistake, how you react when progress feels slow, and whether you believe your future can actually be different from your past. And more specifically, I want to talk about the mindset that keeps so many people playing small. Because sometimes the thing that slows your English growth is not your accent. It is not your memory. It is not your age. It is not even your schedule. Sometimes the thing that quietly holds you back is the story you keep repeating in your own mind. Maybe a story that says, I'm not the kind of person who becomes fluent. Maybe a story that says, other people can improve, but not me. Maybe a story that says, I should stay quiet because if I try, I might embarrass myself. And if we are honest, many of us have lived with these stories for a very long time. So today, I want us to slow down and look at those stories together. Because once you can see the story clearly, you can begin to rewrite it. There's a phrase people often use, the rich mindset and the poor mindset. Usually when people hear those words, they think about money right away. They imagine bank accounts, expensive lifestyles, luxury, success, and status. But that is not what I want to talk about today. Because in my opinion, this idea goes much deeper than money. A person can have a lot of money and still live with a poor mindset, and someone else can have very little, but still carry a rich way of thinking inside them. So what do I mean by that? A poor mindset is not just about lacking resources. It is a way of seeing yourself in the world through fear, lack, limitation, and helplessness. It is the habit of believing there is never enough. Not enough time, not enough talent, not enough opportunity, not enough worth inside you to build something better. A rich mindset, on the other hand, is not about pretending life is easy. It is not about fake positivity or acting like pain does not exist. A rich mindset is a deep inner belief that growth is possible, that learning is possible, that even if your life is not perfect right now, you can still build something meaningful from where you are. That kind of richness cannot always be seen from the outside. It lives in the way a person thinks after failure. It lives in whether they stay curious or shut down. It lives in whether they say, this is hard, so I'm done, or this is hard, so I need a new way. It lives in whether they see themselves as a dead end or as a person still becoming. And I think this matters so much for language learners, because learning English is not only about language, it is also about identity. Every time you open your mouth to speak in a language that is not your first language, you are doing something brave. You are stepping into discomfort. You are allowing yourself to be imperfect in public. You are risking mistakes, pauses, confusion, and awkward moments. That takes courage. But if your mindset is built on fear, then every small mistake feels like proof that you are not good enough. You forget one word, and suddenly your mind says, "See, I knew I couldn't do this." You mispronounce something, and your inner voice whispers, "You sound stupid." You hear someone speaking beautifully, and instead of feeling inspired, you feel smaller. That is what a poor mindset does. It turns learning into evidence against you. But a rich mindset does something very different. It turns learning into evidence for your growth. It says, yes, I made a mistake. That means I am practicing. Yes, I felt nervous. That means I care. Yes, I still have a long way to go. That means I'm still on the journey. Do you see the difference? The situation may look exactly the same from the outside. Two people make the same mistake. Two people feel the same fear. Two people struggle with the same speaking exercise. But the person with a poor mindset walks away feeling defeated, while the person with a rich mindset walks away with a lesson. That is why mindset matters so much, because the way you interpret your experience often matters just as much as the experience itself. And I know this is personal. For many of us, these limiting ways of thinking did not appear out of nowhere. Maybe you grew up around stress. Maybe you watch the adults in your life work hard and still feel exhausted all the time. Maybe you learn to be careful, to stay quiet, to not ask for too much, to not dream too loudly. Maybe you became so used to survival mode that expansion started to feel dangerous. When you live like that for a long time, your mind starts to believe that small is safe. Small dreams, small voice, small expectations, small risks, small life. And sometimes we carry that same energy into English learning without even noticing it. We say, I just want to understand a little. I only want to know basic words. I don't think I'll ever speak fluently. I'm too old. I'm too shy. I started too late. I'm not talented enough. And maybe these sentences sound humble. Maybe they even sound practical. But often they are just fear wearing polite clothes. And I say that with kindness because I know that voice very well. There were times in my own journey when I held myself back before life even had the chance to challenge me. I would shrink my goals before I even began. I would tell myself not to expect too much because I thought disappointment would hurt less that way. But shrinking your dreams does not protect your heart. It only teaches your heart to live in smaller rooms. That is why one of the most healing things you can do for yourself is to realize this. A mindset is not your identity. It is not your destiny. It is not a permanent truth. It is a pattern. And patterns can be changed, not overnight, not with one motivational sentence, not by forcing yourself to be positive every second, but slowly, gently, repeatedly. A new mindset begins when you start noticing the old one. When you catch yourself saying, I can't do this, and instead of blindly believing it, you pause. When you hear that fearful voice and say, is that really true? Or is that just an old habit talking? When you begin to understand that your inner voice is not always telling the truth, that is where freedom begins. A rich mindset is not loud. It does not need to impress anyone. It does not shout, look at me, I'm confident. In fact, real confidence is often much quieter than people think. A rich mindset is calm. It is grounded. It is teachable. It is curious. It does not say, I already know everything. It says, there is still so much I can learn. And honestly, curiosity is one of the most beautiful signs of inner richness. Because fear closes the door, but curiosity opens it. Fear asks, what if I fail? Curiosity asks, what might happen if I try? Fear says, don't speak until you can say it perfectly. Curiosity says, say it, listen, adjust, and learn. Fear says, you are behind. Curiosity says, you are growing. This shift sounds small, but it changes everything. Think about it. When you approach English with fear, every conversation feels like a test. Every mistake feels like a punishment. Every fluent speaker feels like a reminder that you are not there yet. But when you approach English with curiosity, the whole experience becomes lighter. A conversation becomes practice. A mistake becomes feedback. A fluent speaker becomes an example you can learn from. This is why two people can study for the same amount of time and get completely different emotional results. One feels constantly discouraged, while the other stays engaged and hopeful. Not because one has a perfect life, but because one has learned to meet the process with curiosity instead of shame. And I really want to pause here for a moment because this part matters. If you often hear a fearful voice in your mind, that does not mean you are weak. It does not mean you are negative. It does not mean you are broken. It means you are human. Maybe life taught you to protect yourself by expecting the worst. Maybe disappointment happened so many times that fear started feeling familiar. Maybe you learned to doubt yourself before others could doubt you first. That happens to a lot of people. But awareness gives you a choice. You do not have to attack yourself to grow. You do not have to bully yourself into confidence. You do not have to become harsh in order to become strong. Real growth is often much softer than that. Sometimes growth sounds like this. I'm scared, but I will still try. I'm not there yet, but I'm not giving up. I feel embarrassed, but this moment will teach me something. I may be slow, but I am still moving. That is strength. That is maturity. That is a rich way of thinking. I also want to say something that I think many people need to hear. Investing in yourself is not selfish. For a long time, a lot of us hesitate to invest in our own growth. Maybe not just with money, but with time, energy, consistency, and attention. We somehow believe that other things deserve our effort more than we do. We give our best energy to stress. We give our time to distractions. We give our focus to comparison. But when it comes to our own growth, we become hesitant. We say, what if it doesn't work? What if I waste my time? What if I try hard and still stay average? And those questions can feel heavy. But here is the truth. When you invest in your growth, nothing is ever truly wasted. Every page you read helps. Every listening practice helps. Every awkward sentence helps. Every moment you choose to stay with the process instead of running away from it is building something in you. Maybe not always in ways you can measure immediately. Maybe not in a big dramatic way, but quietly, day by day, you are becoming someone stronger, clearer, and more capable. That matters. And maybe this is the most important thing I want to leave with you in this first part. You do not become fluent, confident, or fulfilled by waiting until fear disappears. You grow by learning how to move with fear without letting it lead your life. You grow when you stop asking, what if I'm not enough? And start asking, what kind of person do I become if I keep going? That question changes the direction of everything. Because fluency is not just about speaking well. It is also about becoming someone who trusts themselves enough to keep learning. And that trust is built in small moments, quiet moments, ordinary moments, moments when nobody claps for you, moments when progress feels invisible, moments when all you can do is choose not to quit. That is where a richer mindset begins, not in perfection, not in instant success, but in the simple decision to stop living from fear and start living from possibility. And once that shift begins, even a little, your whole journey starts to feel different. Because you are no longer asking life to guarantee the outcome before you begin. You are simply saying, I am willing to learn. I am willing to grow. I am willing to become more than the version of me that fear created. And that is powerful. There is one small word that has the power to soften your inner world almost instantly. It is such a tiny word, but it can completely change the emotional meaning of a sentence. That word is yet. I really want you to carry this word with you, not just today, but into your daily life this week, because so many of us speak to ourselves in final sentences. I can't speak English fluently. I'm not confident. I'm bad at conversations. I'll never sound natural. I'm not the type of person who can do this. And do you hear how heavy those sentences feel? Do you hear how closed they are? They leave no room for movement, no room for healing, no room for growth. They sound like locked doors. But the moment you add the word yet, everything shifts. I can't speak English fluently yet. I'm not confident yet. I don't trust my voice yet. I'm not where I want to be yet. That one word creates breathing room. It does not deny your struggle. It does not pretend everything is easy. It does not lie to you. It simply reminds you that your current reality is not your final reality. And that matters more than most people realize. Because language learners often suffer twice. First, they suffer because learning is hard. Then they suffer again because of the cruel meaning they attach to that difficulty. They don't just say, "This is challenging." They say, "This is challenging, so maybe I'm not capable." They don't just say, "I need more practice." They say, "I need more practice," which means I'm behind everyone else. They don't just say, "I made a mistake." They say, "I made a mistake, so maybe I should stop talking." This is why the language you use with yourself is so important. Your inner voice becomes the emotional atmosphere in which your growth either survives or slowly shuts down. And if your mind is full of harsh endings, it becomes harder to keep trying. That is why I love the word yet so much. It is humble but hopeful, simple but powerful, gentle but strong. It says, "I am still becoming." And honestly, that may be one of the healthiest sentences a learner can ever believe. Because the truth is, none of us are finished. Not in English, not in confidence, not in emotional maturity, not in the way we understand ourselves. We are all in process. And when you start honoring your process instead of constantly judging it, you begin to feel more alive inside your own journey. But there is another voice I want to talk about today. A quieter one, a deeper one, a voice that shapes so many choices without announcing itself clearly. It is the voice of scarcity. Scarcity is not only about money. In fact, sometimes the most exhausting form of scarcity has nothing to do with money at all. It is the belief that there is not enough time, not enough chances, not enough intelligence, not enough beauty, not enough success, not enough opportunity, not enough room for you. And when scarcity thinking takes root in your life, it changes everything. You stop seeing possibilities and start seeing limits. You stop seeing doors and start seeing walls. You stop trusting life and begin bracing against it. Scarcity thinking can sound very reasonable at first. It's too late for me. Other people started earlier. They are naturally better. I missed my chance. There are too many talented people already. What if there's no place for me? What if I give my best and it still isn't enough? These thoughts can feel practical. They can even sound intelligent. But if you listen carefully, they are not actually helping you build anything. They are just helping fear stay comfortable. And scarcity thinking is especially painful in language learning, because once you believe there is not enough room for you, every fluent speaker starts to feel like a threat instead of a source of inspiration. You hear someone speaking beautiful English, and instead of thinking, "That motivates me," your heart sinks. You see someone growing faster, and instead of feeling curious, you feel left behind. You watch someone being confident, and your mind whispers, "That kind of ease belongs to them, not to me." This is what scarcity does. It turns somebody else's progress into proof of your lack. But that is a lie. Someone else shining does not make you dim. Someone else improving does not cancel your path. Someone else finding their voice does not mean there is no voice left for you. There is room for you too. Maybe not in the exact same way. Maybe not on the exact same timeline. Maybe not with the exact same style. But still, there is room for you. I think many of us need to hear that more often, because deep down, a lot of people are not lazy. They are not unwilling. They are not incapable. They are simply discouraged. Discouraged by comparison. Discouraged by slow progress. Discouraged by how long growth takes. discouraged by the feeling that no matter how hard they try, someone else will always be ahead. And that discouragement slowly teaches them to play small. They stop trying so visibly. They stop asking questions. They stop speaking up. They lower their goals before life even touches them. Not because they truly want less, but because wanting more feels vulnerable. And this is where I want to pause and say something clearly. Playing small is not peace. Sometimes it is just fear in a softer outfit. Playing small can look so harmless from the outside. It can look like being humble. It can look like being realistic. It can look like staying in your comfort zone for now. It can look like waiting until you are fully ready. It can look like staying quiet because you do not want to bother anyone. It can look like telling yourself, this is enough for me, when deep down you know your heart still wants more. And of course, there is nothing wrong with being gentle, quiet, or humble. Those qualities can be beautiful. But there is a difference between true humility and self-erasure. Humility says, I still have a lot to learn. Playing small says, I should stay hidden. Humility says, I'm growing. Playing small says, my voice doesn't matter. Humility stays open. Playing small shrinks. And the tragedy is that many people spend years mistaking their fear for wisdom. They think they are being practical, but really they are being protective. They think they are avoiding disappointment, but really they are avoiding possibility. They think they are staying safe, but really they are slowly abandoning the parts of themselves that were meant to expand. This happens in English learning all the time. A person wants to join the conversation, but stays silent because their grammar is not perfect. A person wants to record their voice, but keeps delaying because they hate how they sound. A person wants to apply for a better job, but convinces themselves their English is not good enough yet. A person wants to practice with others, but keeps hiding behind passive learning because speaking feels too exposing. And of course, I understand that fear. I really do. There is something very vulnerable about using a language you are still learning. It can make you feel childlike, exposed, unfinished, fragile. It can make you feel like you are not fully yourself yet. But please hear me. You do not find your voice by hiding it. You do not build confidence by endlessly waiting for confidence to arrive first. You do not become fluent by staying in the safest corner of your ability forever. Growth asks something from you. Not perfection, not performance, but participation. It asks you to step forward before you feel completely ready. It asks you to speak before your sentence feels perfect. It asks you to practice before your confidence feels stable. It asks you to trust that progress can happen inside imperfect attempts. And that is hard, but it is also freeing. Because once you accept that readiness is not a requirement for growth, you stop postponing your life. You stop saying, one day when I'm better, I'll begin. And you start saying, I begin, and that is how I get better. That is a completely different way of living. And maybe this is one of the deepest costs of playing small. It does not only delay your results, it changes your relationship with yourself. Every time you shrink when your heart wants to stretch, a quiet sadness builds. Every time you silence yourself when you wanted to try, something inside you feels the loss. Every time you say no to growth because fear is louder, you may look safe on the outside, but inside you feel that ache. That ache matters because it is often not failure that hurts us most. It is the feeling of unused potential, the feeling of words left unsaid, the feeling of becoming a smaller version of yourself just to avoid discomfort. That pain is quiet, but real. So let me ask you something gently. Where in your life are you still playing small? Maybe it is in English. Maybe it is in your work. Maybe it is in your dreams. Maybe it is in the way you introduce yourself. Maybe it is in the way you dismiss your own progress. Maybe it is in the way you keep acting like your goals are too much, when in truth they are simply honest. You are allowed to want more growth, more clarity, more courage, more fluency, more visibility, more depth, more aliveness. Wanting more does not make you greedy. Wanting more does not make you arrogant. Wanting more does not make you unrealistic. Sometimes wanting more is simply a sign that your spirit is still awake. And I think that is beautiful. Now let's bring this down to something practical. If scarcity says, there isn't enough, then abundance asks, how can I work with what I have? And I want to be very clear here. Abundance is not fantasy. It is not pretending you have no problems. It is not denying your limitations. It is not standing in front of real struggle and forcing yourself to smile. Abundance is much more grounded than that. It is the decision to stop worshiping what is missing and start using what is available. Maybe you do not have hours every day to study English, but do you have 10 honest minutes? Maybe you cannot travel abroad right now, but can you read out loud at home? Can you listen with attention? Can you shadow a speaker for 5 minutes? Can you keep a journal in simple English? Can you speak to yourself while cooking or walking? Can you stop waiting for ideal conditions and start building with the tools in your hands? That is abundance. Abundance says, this may not be perfect, but it is enough to begin. Abundance says, I will stop insulting small progress. Abundance says, I will respect tiny steps because tiny steps still move me forward. And that mindset changes your energy completely because scarcity keeps you frozen, but abundance gets you moving. Scarcity stares at what is missing until you feel powerless. Abundance honors what is present and creates momentum. Scarcity says, I can't. Abundance asks, how can I? Scarcity says, others are ahead. Abundance says, let me learn from them. Scarcity says, I'm not ready. Abundance says, I become ready by doing. That last one is so important. You become ready by doing. Not by overthinking, not by comparing, not by doubting yourself in circles, not by waiting for some magical day when fear disappears and confidence arrives with perfect timing. You become ready through action, messy action, humble action, repeated action, quiet action, action that nobody applauds, action that looks unimpressive but changes you over time. That is how real growth usually happens, not in one big movie moment, but in 100 tiny moments where you choose not to abandon yourself. So this week, I want to invite you into a very simple practice. Notice when your mind becomes final. Notice when it becomes scarce. Notice when it becomes small. And when that happens, pause. Add the word yet. Ask the question, how can I? And remind yourself, I do not need to shrink in order to stay safe. That one pause may change more than you expect, because your future is not only shaped by the big dramatic decisions, it is shaped by the quiet inner conversations you repeat every day. And once those conversations begin to change, your habits begin to change too. Your posture changes. Your courage changes. Your consistency changes. Even the energy you bring into practice changes. You stop treating yourself like a hopeless case. You stop treating growth like punishment. You stop treating your dreams like something embarrassing that should be hidden. Instead, you begin to live like someone who believes they are worth the effort. And that is where everything starts to deepen. Now let's bring everything down into real life. Because mindset sounds beautiful in theory, but what truly matters is this. How does it live inside your everyday choices? What does a rich mind actually look like on an ordinary Tuesday? What does abundance look like when you are tired, distracted, discouraged, or tempted to go back to old habits? This is where real transformation begins. Because mindset is not just a thought you have once in a while. It is not a motivational quote saved on your phone. It is not a big emotional moment that disappears by the next morning. Mindset is a daily way of living. It is the pattern behind your decisions. It is the energy behind your routines. It is the story behind your habits. And if you really want to grow, not only in English, but in confidence, discipline, peace, and the way you show up in your own life, then it helps to ask a very honest question. What kind of habits belong to the version of me I am trying to become? Because the truth is, a rich mind is not built in one dramatic breakthrough. It is built in repeated choices. Small choices, quiet choices, unseen choices. A rich mind chooses growth when comfort looks easier. A rich mind chooses practice when excuses sound convincing. A rich mind chooses responsibility without turning cold. A rich mind chooses gratitude without becoming passive. A rich mind chooses to build even when the beginning feels unimpressive. And one of the clearest signs of a rich mind is this: it respects time. Not in a stressful, obsessive way, not in a way that makes life feel rigid or joyless, but in a deep, mature way. A rich mind understands that time is life. Time is energy. Time is attention. Time is something you never fully get back. A poor mindset often says, "I'll start tomorrow." A rich mindset gently asks, "Why not begin today?" Even in a small way. A poor mindset waits for perfect mood, perfect timing, perfect motivation. A rich mindset understands that perfection is usually just another delay wearing fancy clothes. And this matters so much for learning English, because many people are not actually losing their growth because they are incapable. They are losing it in tiny leaks of time. A little procrastination here, endless scrolling there, a habit of postponing practice because they do not feel ready enough. Days pass, weeks pass, sometimes months pass. And then they look back and wonder why nothing has changed. But change was always hidden inside those small hours. 5 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of listening, one short paragraph spoken out loud, a few lines in a journal, one brave voice recording, one attempt that felt awkward but honest. This is how growth often enters a life, not through intensity, but through consistency. And a rich mind knows that. It stops worshiping intensity and starts honoring rhythm. It stops asking, "Can I do something huge today?" and starts asking, "What small act would move me forward right now?" That question can save you from so much frustration, because when people think too big too soon, they often burn out. They set impossible standards, fail to meet them, and then use that failure as proof that they are not disciplined. But that is not always true. Sometimes they were simply trying to build a mountain with no staircase. A rich mindset builds the staircase, step by step, brick by brick, word by word, day by day. Another beautiful habit of a rich mind is that it learns from everything. And I mean everything. A rich mind does not waste pain. It does not waste mistakes. It does not waste embarrassment. It does not waste failure by turning it into shame alone. Instead, it asks, "What is this teaching me?" That is such a powerful question, because life will not always feel smooth. Learning will not always feel rewarding. Some days you will feel inspired. Other days you will feel behind. Some conversations will go well. Others will leave you replaying every sentence in your head afterward. That is normal. But the important thing is not whether everything feels easy. The important thing is whether you know how to turn your experience into wisdom. A poor mindset meets difficulty and says, "This proves I'm not good enough." A rich mindset meets difficulty and says, "This is showing me where I need to grow." Do you see how different that is? One response closes the path. The other response strengthens it. Even failure becomes useful in the hands of a rich mind. Because failure is not the opposite of growth. Very often, it is part of growth. And honestly, some of the most valuable moments in life come wrapped in discomfort. Not because pain is wonderful, not because struggle should be romanticized, but because discomfort often reveals where your edges are. It shows you where you still shrink, where you still doubt yourself, where you still need patience, skill, or courage. That is useful information. So the next time something feels awkward in your English journey, try not to rush into self-judgment. Pause, breathe, ask better questions. Not, "Why am I so bad at this?" but "What exactly felt difficult here? What can I practice next? What did I do better than before? What lesson is hidden inside this moment?" That is how a rich mind protects progress. Not by avoiding mistakes, but by harvesting lessons from them. And there is another habit that rich minds practice so quietly that many people do not even notice it. They build while others wait. This one is big because so many people spend years waiting for a better mood, a better season, a better opportunity, a better version of themselves. They wait to feel more confident, wait to have more time, wait to have more money, wait for fear to disappear, wait for life to become less messy. And sometimes that waiting sounds reasonable, but sometimes it is just a very elegant form of avoidance. A rich mind does not always wait for the perfect door to open. Sometimes it builds a window. Maybe you cannot take an expensive class right now. Fine. What free resources can you use? Maybe you do not have someone to practice with daily. Fine. Can you talk to yourself, record your voice, repeat after podcasts, or join online spaces? Maybe your progress feels slow. Fine. Can you still keep showing up with respect for the process? Builders think differently. They do not only ask, what do I have? They ask, what can I create with what I have? That is such a powerful shift, because once you stop staring only at what is missing, you start noticing how much is still possible. And I think that is one of the quiet superpowers of a rich mindset. It is creative, not necessarily artistic, not necessarily loud, but creative in the way it approaches obstacles. It understands that life may not always give you ideal conditions, but you still have choices. You still have resourcefulness. You still have the ability to adapt, to try again, to learn a new method, to take a smaller step instead of taking no step at all. That is real strength. Now let's talk about something that may not sound exciting at first, but can completely protect your growth. Boundaries. Rich minds know how to protect their energy. And that matters because your growth does not only depend on what you do, it also depends on what you allow to drain you. Some people cannot grow because they have no potential. Others cannot grow because all their energy is leaking out through constant distraction, constant people-pleasing, constant comparison, constant mental noise. A rich mind learns to say no. No to habits that steal hours and leave emptiness. No to voices that keep pulling you into self-doubt. No to environments that constantly reduce your self-respect. No to the pressure to be everything for everyone all the time. This does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean becoming selfish. It means becoming intentional. Because if you never protect your attention will be consumed. If you never protect your peace will be negotiated away. If you never protect your dreams will remain at the mercy of every distraction. For language learners, this can be very practical. Maybe it means setting aside a few quiet minutes each day that belong only to your growth. Maybe it means spending less time comparing yourself online. Maybe it means not listening so closely to people who laugh at your mistakes or make you feel foolish for trying. Maybe it means choosing one or two simple methods and sticking with them instead of chasing every new trick on the internet. Boundaries create space, and growth needs space. Not just time, but emotional space, mental space, sacred space. Space where you are allowed to be a beginner. Space where you're allowed to improve slowly. Space where your worth is not constantly on trial. That kind of space is precious. And then there is one more habit of a rich mind that is often misunderstood. Gratitude. Real gratitude is not pretending everything is fine. Real gratitude is not smiling through pain and ignoring what hurts. Real gratitude is not denial. Real gratitude is the ability to say, my life is not perfect, but there is still something here worth honoring. That is powerful. Because gratitude changes the way you look at your journey. Instead of saying, I'm so far behind, gratitude says, I'm thankful I still get to learn. Instead of saying, I hate how slow this is, gratitude says, I'm glad I haven't given up. Instead of saying, why am I not there yet? Gratitude says, look how far I've already come. And no, gratitude does not remove every struggle, but it changes the emotional climate inside which you face that struggle. A grateful heart notices resources. A bitter heart notices only lack. A grateful mind sees chances. A defeated mind sees only obstacles. And this is so important because what you notice influences what you do next. If all you notice is how far you still have to go, you may become discouraged. But if you also notice your progress, your tiny improvements, your stronger awareness, your courage to keep showing up, then something in you stays alive. Hope stays alive. Momentum stays alive. Self-respect stays alive. That is why I truly believe gratitude is not a decoration for personal growth. It is fuel for personal growth. Now, after all of this, I want to come back to something very close to the heart of today's message. Your mindset is a story, a repeated story, a familiar story, a practice story. And sometimes the most painful thing is not the external struggle. Sometimes it is the story you keep telling yourself while you struggle. Maybe your story has sounded like this. People like me don't become fluent. I always start and stop. I'm too late. I'm not special. I'm not smart enough. I'm not confident enough. I'm just not one of those people. But listen carefully. Those are not facts. Those are sentences. And sentences can be rewritten. This may sound simple, but it is life-changing once you truly understand it. Because when you mistake a sentence for a fact, you stop challenging it. You start obeying it. You start building your life around it. But when you realize it is only a sentence, only an old line repeated too many times, you begin to reclaim power. You can say, that story protected me once, but it no longer leads me where I want to go. You can say, that sentence may feel familiar, but it is not my future. You can say, I do not need my old fear to narrate my next chapter. That is a beautiful moment. The moment you stop treating your old beliefs like permanent truth. And rewriting your story does not require dramatic words. It often starts with gentle, believable truth. Not, I am perfect, but I am learning. Not, I have no fear, but I am trying even with fear. Not, I'm already fluent, but I am becoming more fluent step by step. Not, I never struggle, but my struggle does not cancel my progress. This kind of language matters because your mind listens to what you repeatedly say. Your habits listen. Your confidence listens. Your nervous system listens. Your future listens. So speak to yourself in a way that leaves room for growth. Speak to yourself in a way that invites effort instead of shame. Speak to yourself in a way that sounds like partnership, not punishment. You need that. Especially on the days when motivation is low. Especially on the days when you feel unimpressive. Especially on the days when your progress feels invisible. Because on those days, what carries you forward is not hype. It is relationship. Your relationship with yourself. Your willingness to remain on your own side. And that, to me, is one of the deepest forms of inner wealth. When you stop being your own enemy. When your inner voice becomes steady, honest but kind. Challenging, but not cruel. Clear, but not condemning. That changes everything. And remember this too. You do not rise to your hopes alone. You often fall to your habits. That is why dreaming matters, but daily practice matters even more. So begin where you are. Read one page. Listen to one recording. Repeat one sentence 10 times. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Write, even if it feels simple. Try again, even if yesterday felt messy. Do not insult the power of small beginnings. A seed looks small too, but inside it, there is an entire future waiting quietly. You are allowed to grow like that. Slowly, naturally, faithfully. You do not need to become amazing overnight. You just need to stop abandoning yourself in the middle of the process. And maybe that is the real heart of this whole episode. Stop playing small with your own life. Stop shrinking to make fear comfortable. Stop telling yourself stories that keep you locked in old versions of who you are. You were not made only to survive your days. You were also made to expand inside them, to learn, to speak, to try, to fail and rise wiser, to build trust with yourself, to become someone who no longer needs permission to grow. Your voice matters. Your effort matters. Your journey matters. And even if you are still unsure, even if you still tremble, even if you still feel like a beginner in so many ways, that does not make your path less meaningful. It makes it real. So today, maybe do not ask, am I already enough? Maybe ask, am I willing to keep becoming? Because becoming is beautiful. Becoming is alive. Becoming is where confidence is formed. Becoming is where fluency is grown. Becoming is where your new story begins. Soft music lifts gently, like a hopeful ending. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here on Chasing English. If something in this message touched your heart, encouraged you, or reminded you of a part of yourself that you want to bring back to life, I hope you hold on to that feeling today. And maybe, just maybe, share this episode with someone else who has been doubting their voice, shrinking their dreams, or forgetting that growth is still possible for them too. And before you go, I want to leave you with one small question. What is one new story you are ready to tell yourself from today onward? Maybe it is, I am not behind. I am on my way. Maybe it is, my voice deserves to be heard. Maybe it is, I can't do it yet, but I am learning. Maybe it is, I will stop playing small with my own future. Whatever your new story is, speak it gently. Speak it often. Live it little by little. Keep practicing. Keep trusting the process. Keep believing that your growth matters. And as always, let's keep chasing fluency together. I'll see you in the next one.